It was long overdue, and no, I'm not talking about the Mar-a-Lago search, although we will get to that in a couple of minutes. I'm talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is finally getting signed into law a year after its original incarnation, the Build Back Better plan that was first introduced. Along the way, some key points, like cutting child care costs and increasing affordable housing, fell away, but the final bill on its way to the president made historic strides in combating climate change, controlling drug prices for people on Medicare, and making corporations finally pay a fair share in taxes. Among those celebrating the House floor when the bill passed on Friday was Assistant Speaker of the House and Congresswoman from Massachusetts, Katherine Clark, who joins me now. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Nice to be with you, Jim.
So that is on its way to the president's desk. Last week, he signed the bill about veterans' health care. Gas prices are coming down. Inflation is stabilizing. Are Democrats in private meetings now talking about retaining control of the House or just damage mitigation when it comes to the midterms?
We are excited about these victories for the American people. And every single campaign comes down to who's going to fight for me. And it couldn't be clearer to the American people that it's Democrats, whether we're fighting to reduce their health care costs, fighting to make sure that they have reproductive freedoms, investing in infrastructure, in microcomputer chips so that we can build things here in the United States. And what we see on the other side of the aisle is an absolute commitment to obstruction and to fight for one person, and that's Donald Trump.
We'll get to Trump in just a couple of seconds. I forgot the CHIPS and Science bill, by the way. That's also a very important piece. Glad you mentioned it. One bill that didn't make it, though, because of the Senate, was the Women's Health Protection Act, which would guarantee a right to abortion across this country. You and Congresswoman Presley were among demonstrators at the Supreme Court the other day. Two of you were arrested. What's the game plan here? I understand the motivation. What's the game plan to undo the damage the Supreme Court did?
Our game plan is to use every lever, every bully pulpit that we have, because we know what is at stake. We are seeing the criminalization of women who are seeking health care. That is how extreme the GOP position is. That is the extreme effect of the Alito decision in the Dobbs case. And so we're going to continue to put pressure to do whatever we can to pass protective health care, to use executive orders in our agencies, and to make sure that we are spelling it out for the American people that their freedom is on the ballot in the midterms, and it is only the Democrats who are working to ensure that those fundamental choices that we make about when and if to have children remain with our families in accordance with our faith and in accordance with what our doctor says is necessary for us. This overreach into women's lives is such a deprivation of fundamental rights to make those critical decisions on your own without having politicians in that doctor's office with you. And we are going to do everything we can to keep drawing attention to this and using every way possible to protect women's access to health care.
You know, Katherine Clark, if we just made a list of the things you talked about, all of which are factually accurate, forget the opinion, but factually accurate, where the Democratic Party is on abortion, which is where 2/3 of America is, climate change, reducing the cost of drugs for older people on Medicare. I can go down the list. In light of the fact that polls still suggest, despite all this, that the Republicans will control the House come January, the conclusion one has to reach, unless you just say history is history, is the Democrats are rotten at messaging, getting better in the last few months at passing laws, rotten at messaging. That's a pretty accurate statement, is it not?
No, I don't think it is. Listen, one of the powers the GOP has is they're absolutely shameless. So they will say whatever with no regard to consequence or to tethering to fact or science, and they repeat it. And it is easy to repeat short talking points that have nothing to do with the reality that families are facing. What they're terrible at and what Democrats excel at is actually doing something to help fix some of these problems. So whether, and I think a great example of voters understanding this is looking at what just happened in Kansas. Trying to put on a primary ballot where there were only Republicans in contested votes and contested races, a change to their constitution so that they too could restrict abortion care in their state was soundly defeated. And not just where one big and more Democratic areas, but the vote totals were really not what people expected in rural and suburban parts of Kansas as well. I think that we underestimate that the American people are watching. They watched what happened and on January 6th. They watched those January 6th committee hearings. They are watching that Republicans are voting to criminalize healthcare. They are voting against environmental investments so that we can help people address these lethal effects of climate change. And they're doing nothing to create great paying jobs for people. And on the gun violence, they won't even vote for an Amber Alert that would alert you of an active shooter in your community. That is how extreme they are. And I think that the American people are realizing that this is really what is on the ballot. Are we going to have a democracy? Are we going to have a Congress that fights for you and your family, or are we not?
Well, speaking of shameless, everybody watching knows about the search of Mar-a-Lago, and I assume most know what the primary Republican response has been. I want to play some sound from three of your colleagues, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and Elise Stefanik. Here they are.
We now know that there was an FBI informant at Mar-a-Lago. Who is that, and how many other FBI informants are around President Trump on a daily basis? These are the real enemies.
You guys, I'm pissed. We are a nation of law and order, and this raid by the FBI on President Trump's home is totally un-American. This is Gestapo crap, and it will not stand.
President Donald Trump is Joe Biden's most likeliest political opponent in 2024. The FBI raid of President Trump is a complete abuse and overreach of its authority.
Most likeliest. Well, obviously, they're not concerned about spawning violence. We know what happened in Cincinnati when the guy tried to go after the FBI, was ultimately killed. We know what his Truth Social postings were about killing the FBI if you were to go to Florida to follow up on Mar-a-Lago. What's your reaction to this grotesquely irresponsible rhetoric from people who have the same job you do?
It is grotesquely irresponsible, and it is so dangerous. To hear Lauren Boebert in that quote talking about law and order, this was a legal search warrant signed off by a federal judge, and they are just totally making up a pack of lies about what this is, instead of saying, let's wait and see. Let's see what this investigation turns into. And it is planting very real seeds of violence that we've already seen play out. One life has already been lost. We've had other armed people showing up at FBI headquarters. And I can tell you that the threat level against law enforcement, against the federal judge who signed that search warrant, against politicians, is all on the rise. This is a very dangerous game they are playing. And it is the only thing they have to sell at the midterms, because they have been steadfast and obstructing any sort of legislation that can actually help the American people as they continue to face rising costs and a pandemic-driven economy that has been a tough one. But since they've done nothing on that side, they are going back to their old playbook of actually instigating civil war, of actually trying to call people to believe that all of this is made up and rigged, just the same playbook from the 2020 elections. And it is a very, very dangerous game that they are playing.
Speaking of instigating civil war or something like it, you're a lawyer. Do you think, based on the January 6th hearings your colleagues have held in the House that will resume in September, that they've demonstrated that Donald Trump has committed crimes?
I think that they have put forward a lot of evidence that Donald Trump knew. He was told repeatedly that this election was sound and that he had lost fair and square. And he continued to not only try and influence those secretaries of states that he called to just find him 11,000 votes, but he also knew what he was doing when he brought a mob to the Capitol and then turned them on Mike Pence, his own vice president.
Did he commit crimes in that behavior, with that behavior?
I think that there is potential for crimes. There's also evidence that I have not seen, and we are going to let the truth play out. The committee is not done with its investigation. They are putting together their final report, but it is chilling what they have uncovered and the presentation that they have made about the actions of Donald Trump on January 6th and the months leading up to it.
Congresswoman, you're very close to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and 4 years ago she pledged she would not run for another term as leader of the Democrats after this year. She says she's running for re-election in San Francisco, has refused to say whether she is running for the leadership position again. Is she?
You know, Nancy Pelosi, we are so fortunate to have her. And I know that her focus is on the midterm election. She is running for re-election. She will be our speaker into November. And until she says that she is not running, you know, we are just lucky to have her leadership.
Would you vote for her again if she chose to break her pledge and ran for speaker or minority leader again? Would you vote for her?
I would. I think she's been an incredible leader for the Democrats.
Last question. Back home, after spending all this time in Washington, I just spoke to the mayor of a city in your district, the mayor of Medford, talking about, I know you can guess what, the orange line, the green line. What's your quick take on what the people of your district and beyond are about to endure come Friday?
You know, this is horrendous. It's really beyond an inconvenience. And the MBTA is broken. And I am glad that we are having a governor's race. I support Maura Healey, who really understands what's at stake for communities in my district, like Medford. Many of my communities are on the orange line and rely on it for employees, for getting to work themselves. And this is a system that needs a complete overhaul. And I think that Maura Healey is going to be the person to do it. Was
Baker right to shut it down for a month?
You know, I don't know what the options are when we are in a situation where the MBTA has to decide between fundamental safety and actually running their cars. So, you know, those decisions, I trust they made the one that was the safest. But how did we get here? This nothing sudden. It has been years of neglect, and we have to have someone in the governor's office who is going to pay attention to this and make real progress. This is really unacceptable that in Massachusetts, this is how we solve our public transportation problems, is by shutting lines down for weeks at a time.
Katherine Clark, it's good to see you. Good luck. Be well.
Thank you.